There's a toll John Shipton has taken that no parent should have to endure. It's a 14-year emotional battle that Shipton has had to deal with because of the persecution of his son for alleged crimes that are not only unproven, but should never, ever have been charged. And yet, Shipton remains stoic. His son, of course, is Julian Assange, the man the US has aggressively hunted and accused of being a spy simply for doing his job as a journalist. Shipton's brave stoicism in the face of Assange's adversity isn't contrived. He's paid a heavy price emotionally as he mourns his son incarceration and declining mental and physical health. And, as John recently told me during an interview, Assange's mental health remains fragile as it fluctuates with the intensity of whatever's happening. Now, the 2003 invasion of Iraq was a war based on a lie, and war crimes were committed, and WikiLeaks exposed to the world that it had been duped about US action in Iraq and Afghanistan. And just as Daniel Ellsberg in 1971 leaked the Pentagon Papers to the New York Times, revealing secret information about the Vietnam War, it was Assange's access to a US military video, which he called collateral murder, that showed a 2007 attack by US Apache helicopters in Baghdad, killing a dozen innocent civilians, including 2 journalists. Now, the video clearly depicted murder, and US accusations of espionage and other crimes never committed turned Assange into an international fugitive. The battle to free Assange from prison and stop the US from extraditing him has been a dire battle for his legal team, of which prominent legal mind Greg Barnes SC is an advisor to the Australian Assange campaign. Barnes's tireless efforts and his lobbying of the Albanese government to bring Assange home has almost certainly thwarted the US from ever getting their man, and could soon see an end to a saga that should never have been. However, Assange isn't only a victim of an overly aggressive US and the hand of American hegemony, but the victim of 6 appalling Australian governments, from Rudd right through to Morrison, that have put US interests ahead of protecting an innocent Australian. Previous Australian governments were complicit in the US actions. They've pandered to whatever the US has asked for. And the UK, they haven't simply been a proxy. They've been an equal partner in this travesty. Simply, Assange was abandoned by successive Australian governments because fighting to free and repatriate an innocent Australian and engage the Americans on the issue just wasn't Australia's priority. And it sent a clear message that foreign interests were more important than protecting Australian citizens abroad. Until now, the Albanese government has shown its approach to foreign affairs matters and how it manages diplomatic relations is vastly different to that of previous Australian governments. Australia, under Albanese, is no longer seemingly prepared to be treated as diplomatic minions, because the 2022 May federal election was as much about freeing Assange as it was about redefining and repositioning Australia globally. It was an election where independents, Greens, and many politicians from across the spectrum stood together on an Assange platform. 88% of Australians recently surveyed wanted Julian returned home to Australia. Now, Albanese has shown leadership as well as improving and strengthening our diplomatic relationships to the world. But will Assange ever return to Australia? Well, the ABC's Australia's Global Affairs editor, John Lyons, who's been closely reporting on Assange, believes he will be freed unconditionally and back on Australia's shores within a couple of months. It's a hopeful call, but Lyons is a journalist of telling reputation, and as Assange's father Shipton rightfully identifies, Lyons' call places weight on the ABC, his own reputation, and an expectation on Albanese, Wong and the government. Australian and US ties have been significantly strong for over 100 years, and Albanese and Wong are cognizant of how important Australia is to the US strategic interests. And Don't think the Americans are oblivious to the vital role Australia plays in its China containment strategy, because Australia's ongoing cooperation in the South China Sea could seemingly be the leverage used to get the Americans to drop their wrongful pursuit of Assange and allow Australia to bring him back home a free man. Barnes says Assange is a person who's done the world a great service, let alone Australia. He's exposed war crimes committed by the US and its allies in theatres of war. And Shipton's long wait for Assange's release appears to finally be ending. And if Lyons is right and Julian is repatriated, then a hero's welcome could and should await him. And as far as a legacy goes, Albanese and Wong would have rightfully earned themselves to hero status.